Alex Eala just dismantled 3 consecutive opponents ranked inside the world's top 10 on grass at a WTA 500 in a country she had never competed in before this week. Donna Vekic, the reigning Queen's Club champion, gone in straight sets. Elena Rybakina, ranked second in the world, dispatched 7-5, 6-4 in what Eala herself described by saying, "I'm still shaking." And then Elena Svitolina, a 3-time Italian Open champion seeded 6th here in Berlin, handled 6-3, 6-4 with a composure that bordered on eerie for a 21-year-old playing in her first WTA 500 semi-final. 3 matches, 3 straight sets wins, 3 top 10 scalps. That sequence alone would make for one of the stories of the 2026 grass season. But now she walks into a semi-final against Linda Nosková, the woman who beat her 6-2, 6-0 at Indian Wells barely 3 months ago, and the entire texture of this Berlin run changes. This is no longer just about momentum. This is about whether Alex Eala has become a fundamentally different competitor since March, or whether the player who was taken apart in the California desert still lives somewhere inside the one currently terrorizing this draw. Let's rewind to Indian Wells because the scoreline alone does not capture what happened. Eala had arrived in the round of 16 on a surge of confidence, having beaten Diana Yastremska 3-set thriller, and then benefited from Coco Gauff's retirement while leading. She was ranked 31st seeded and playing with a freedom that suggested she genuinely belonged at this level. Then Noskova walked onto the court and made her look like she had never played a tennis match before. The Czech player's first serve was landing consistently in the mid-160s in kilometers per hour, kicking wide to Eala's backhand return with relentless accuracy. Eala won just 2 games. She won 0 games in the second set. In her post-match press conference, she acknowledged the sting of it, but insisted she was here to stay. It was the kind of loss that either hardens you or haunts you, and 3 months ago, nobody could be certain which direction it would push her. What happened instead was the clay court season, and calling it humbling is generous. Eala lost to Leylah Fernandez 6-1, 6-4 in Stuttgart. She lost to Elise Mertens 6-2, 6-1 in Madrid. She fought hard in Rome, reaching the 3rd round, but was beaten by Rybakina in straight sets there, 2, 6-4, 6-3. Strasbourg brought a 3-set loss to a qualifier. Roland Garros brought a straight-set first-round defeat to her close friend Iva Jovic. From April to late May, Eala won a total of 4 matches on clay against 6 losses. Her ranking slipped from a career-high neighborhood near 29 down toward the mid-50s. There was a period where it felt like the entire 2025 breakthrough season, the Swiatek upset in Miami, the first Grand Slam main draw win, the Eastbourne final, all of it, might be reseeding into the category of things that happened once. Then the grass arrived, and something shifted. Not dramatically, not overnight. It happened in Birmingham at a WTA 125 tournament where Eala was the top seed, and where expectations were manageable. She beat Priscilla Hahn 6-0, 6-2 in the opener, a score that reads like a formality, but mattered psychologically because it was the first clean win she had posted in weeks. The Cornet match in the second round was tighter, with Eala trailing 2-5 in the second set before clawing back to win 6-2, 7-5. The semi-final against Rebecca Mazarova went to 3 sets. And the final against Nikola Bartankova was a war, complete with rain delays and a first-set loss that Eala closed out 5-7, 6-3, 7-5 to claim her first grass court title. That victory also snapped a deeply painful statistical drought. Eala had been 0-13 against Czech opponents before that final. Bartankova became the first Czech player she had ever defeated in professional competition. That detail matters enormously heading into the semi-final because Linda Nosková is Czech and Eala's historical futility against Czech players was never purely coincidental. Czech tennis produces a specific profile of player, technically sound, flat-hitting, comfortable on fast surfaces, and unshakably calm under pressure. It is a school of tennis that had given Eala fits for years. Breaking through against Bartankova in Birmingham did not erase the pattern, but it fractured the mental ceiling that the pattern had imposed. When Eala arrived in Berlin as an unseeded wild card, she was carrying something she had not possessed at any point during the clay swing, the recent memory of winning under duress on this exact surface. Now consider Noskova's path to this semi-final because it tells its own story. The 8th seed has been brutally efficient. She beat Renata Zarazua 6-1, 6-4 in the first round. She beat Diane Perry 6-2, 6-2 in the second round. And in the quarterfinals, she demolished Paula Badosa 6-1, 6-3 in just 68 minutes, firing 8 aces and converting 4 of 9 break points while Badosa could not convert a single one of 7. Noskova's serve has been a weapon all season, averaging 6.6 aces per match over the last 52 weeks with an average first serve speed around 163 km per hour. On grass, that serve becomes even more dangerous because the low bounce rewards flat deliveries and makes it harder for returners to gain leverage on the ball. Against Badosa, Noskova saved every break point she faced, going 7 for 7. That is a player in complete control of her service games. Tactically, this semi-final presents a fascinating geometric puzzle. IGA is left-handed. Noskova is right-handed. On grass, where the serve is amplified and the return window shrinks, the left-handed serve configuration changes everything about the deuce court. IGA can serve wide to Noskova's backhand on the deuce side, pulling her off the court and opening up the entire ad side for the second shot. On the ad side, IGA can jam Noskova's body with a serve into the hip. These angles are not available to right-handed players in the same way, and they partially explain how IGA has been able to trouble top 10 players all week. Against Rybakina, IGA hit 6 aces and held serve consistently enough to stay in the match during the tight passages. Against Svitolina, IGA's serve generated 3 aces and, more importantly, produced only 2 double faults across 2 sets. For a player whose serve has historically been identified as the weakest part of her game, that kind of reliability on grass is a significant development. But here is the counterargument, and it is a serious one. Noskova's serve is bigger, harder, and more consistent than Bencic's, Rybakina's, or Svitolina's on a per-match basis this week. Rybakina obviously has one of the biggest serves in the women's game, but she was not at her best against IGA, dropping her first serve percentage and failing to find her range into the set. Noskova, by contrast, has been dialed in from the opening game of the tournament. Her first serve percentage against Badosa was 71.9% and she won 73.2% of those first serve points. Those are numbers that give even established top 10 players serious trouble. When IGA faced Noskova at Indian Wells, the return game was the first thing that collapsed. IGA won just 24% of first return points in that match on the hard courts of the California desert. On grass, where the serve is faster and the bounce is lower, that problem could theoretically worsen rather than improve. The question then is whether IGA's own serving has improved enough to keep her in this match even if she cannot break Noskova consistently. Indian Wells. The match was effectively over because IGA could neither hold serve nor threaten Noskova's serve. It was a double failure. On grass, the dynamic shifts because holding serve becomes easier for everyone. If IGA can hold at a rate close to what she showed against Svitolina, where she lost only one service game in the second set and won nearly 80% of first serve points when that first delivery landed, she creates the possibility of tight sets rather than runaway ones. Tight sets change the psychological calculus entirely. A 6-2, 6-0 loss leaves no room for belief. A tiebreak at 6-6 in the first set would put IGA in territory she already navigated this week against Vekic, where she trailed before finding her range in the back half of the set. There is another dimension to this match that the numbers do not fully capture, and it involves what IGA has been doing to opponents psychologically all week. Against Rybakina, she was visibly vibrating with adrenaline after the win, telling the crowd she was still shaking. But during the match itself, she played with an aggressive clarity that unsettled the world number 2. She took the ball early, stepped inside the baseline on returns, and refused to let Rybakina dictate from the back of the court. Against Svitolina, a player known for her defensive stubbornness and ability to make opponents play one more ball than they want to, Ella won 56.1% of total service points and converted 5 of 10 break-point opportunities. That 50% break-point conversion rate is remarkable against someone of Svitolina's caliber because the Ukrainian is one of the most dogged defenders on tour. Ella did not beat her by waiting. She beat her by attacking, by choosing to step forward rather than absorb. Can that same approach work against Noskova? The answer depends on which version of Noskova's game Eala encounters. When Noskova is firing and her first serve is landing in the mid-160s, there is very little any player outside the absolute top of the game can do except hold their own serve and hope for tiebreaks. Noskova's power is genuine and physical. She stands 5 feet 10 inches. She generates pace from both wings, and her backhand, hit flat and hard, travels through the court with a speed that forces opponents into reactive positions. When she is on, she looks like a top 5 player. Her semi-final run at Indian Wells, where she pushed world number 1 Aryna Sabalenka, demonstrated that ceiling. Her win over Coco Gauff in Madrid, 6-4, 1-6, 7-6, showed she can compete with and defeat the very best on any surface. But Noskova's season has also included significant dips. She is 15-10 on the year, which is a winning record, but not a dominant one. She lost in the quarterfinals of Stuttgart to Svitolina. She lost in the quarterfinals of Madrid to Marta Kostyuk after beating Gauff, which suggested she could elevate for one big match, but then flattened in the next round. Her grass court career record sits at 57.1%, noticeably lower than her hard court numbers. Last year at Wimbledon, she reached the 4th round, her best grass result, but was beaten there by Amanda Anisimova. Grass is not her worst surface, but it is the one where her game has the narrowest margin for error because her powerful ground strokes need time to set up, and the faster conditions do not always grant that time. This creates an opening for Eala that did not exist at Indian Wells. On the hard courts of the desert, Noskova had all the time in the world to wind up and unload. The ball sat up at a comfortable height, and the court speed was fast enough to reward her power, but not so fast that it prevented her from finding her timing. Grass is different. Grass produces lower bounces, which compress Noskova's strike zone and force her to bend lower on ground strokes or take the ball on the rise, which reduces her margin. Grass also rewards variety over raw power and certain rally patterns. Eala's left-handed slice backhand, which skids and stays low on grass, becomes a neutralizing tool that it simply is not on hard courts. If Eala can use that slice to keep the ball below Noskova's comfort zone, and then step in to attack the short ball with her forehand, she introduces a pattern that Noskova did not have to deal with at Indian Wells. The crowd factor also deserves mention. Berlin has not historically been a hotbed of Filipino tennis support, but Eala's run this week has generated a buzz that has grown with each round. The Philippine diaspora in Europe is considerable, and social media coverage of her wins over Rybakina and Svitolina has turned this semi-final into an event that transcends the local tennis audience. IGA has spoken publicly about how the presence of Filipino fans changes her energy on court. At Indian Wells, she described the experience of selling out stadiums as insane and something she had only dreamed about. At Abu Dhabi, she saved a match point against Alexandra Sasnovich in a 3-set thriller fueled in part by a raucous crowd. IGA feeds on atmosphere in a way that distinguishes her from many players her age. She does not shrink when the stakes rise. She expands. Noskova, on the other hand, carries the steadiness of the Czech tennis tradition. She grew up in the village of Bystrica, started playing at 7, and moved to Přerov specifically to train at a higher level. Her coaches, Tomáš Krupa and Lucas de Lauhi, have built a player who trusts her process and does not get rattled by the opponent's energy. At the 2024 Australian Open, Noskova stunned world number 1 IGA Swiatek in the 3rd round without showing a flicker of intimidation. She was 19 years old. She played as if the ranking across the net was irrelevant, and she played that way because her technical foundation was deep enough that confidence did not need to come from external validation. That kind of composure is exactly what makes her dangerous against a player riding an emotional wave. So, what does IGA need to do specifically to avoid a repeat of Indian Wells? 3 things stand out. First, she has to win the first 3 games of the match. Not because those games decide the scoreline, but because they decide the emotional framework. At Indian Wells, Noskova jumped on IGA early and established a dominance that became self-reinforcing. If IGA can hold serve comfortably in the opening game and then make Noskova work for her hold in the second, the match immediately feels different from their previous encounter. Eala's confidence this week has been built on the foundation of strong starts. She won the first set against all three opponents. She needs that pattern to continue. Second, Eala has to make Noskova serve second serves. The Czech player's first serve is a weapon that eliminates rallies before they begin. But her second serve, while still confident, is significantly more attackable. Against Badosa, Noskova won only 56.2% of second serve points, a number that drops from the dominant 73.2% she recorded on first serves. If Eala can take an aggressive return position, standing closer to the baseline and crowding the service line, she puts pressure on Noskova to hit first serves with more precision. Any increase in double faults or second serve exposure shifts the balance of the match. Third, and this is perhaps the most important tactical point, Eala must avoid playing from behind the baseline. Indian Wells, she was pushed back by Noskova's depth and pace, and found herself hitting from positions 2 or 3 meters behind the line. On grass, that position is death. The ball is already low and fast, and adding distance only makes the geometry worse. Eala's best tennis this week has come when she stands on or inside the baseline, takes the ball early, and redirects it with her natural timing. That timing, the ability to use an opponent's pace against them, is Eala's most dangerous attribute. It is the quality that allowed her to trouble Rybakina and control Svitolina. Against Noskova, it is the quality that will determine whether this is a competitive semi-final or a one-sided correction. This is the biggest match of Alex Eala's career. That is not an exaggeration. A WTA 500 semi-final on grass, 2 weeks before Wimbledon against a top 15 opponent who has already beaten her emphatically once this season. The Birmingham title was meaningful, but it was a WTA 125. The wins over Rybakina and Svitolina were seismic, but they were individual results. This semi-final is the culmination of all of it, the proving ground where the entire grass court surge either crystallizes into a new competitive identity or reveals itself as a brilliant but isolated hot streak. For Noskova, the stakes are high, too. She is chasing her career-best result on grass, having equaled it by reaching the stage. A final appearance in Berlin would announce her as a genuine threat at Wimbledon, not just a hard-court specialist who tolerates grass. Both players need this match for reasons that go beyond the ranking points and prize money. Both players will walk onto that Berlin grass carrying the weight of what this result means for the months ahead. The scoreline at Indian Wells says Noskova wins this match easily. The evidence from this week in Berlin says IGA has become someone the Indian Wells scoreline cannot predict. Both of those statements are true, and they cannot both be right at the same time. That contradiction is what makes this semi-final worth every second of your attention.